Hey, have you heard of the Lorax's rival? Do you have any idea who created him, and why, and what his mission is? Hey guys, there are various ways to see the same thing. One of those ways is how nature should be treated. That's why we have the perspective of the Lorax, who wants to save the truffula trees because he's their protector. But what almost nobody knows is that there's also the perspective of TRUAX. TRUAX is a hidden children's book, and its story is strangely dark, as nobody knows about it. But since we discovered this, let's say, rival of the orange and mustached little monkey who protects the truffula trees, we had to tell you about it. We've brought all the details about TRUAX for you to see who he is and what sets him apart from the protagonist of the 2012 movie. The Lorax, despite gaining a lot of popularity now, was actually released over 10 years ago. In the movie, we see a strong ideal of nature preservation and how each one of us is responsible for making the world a more balanced place with a better environment. Just like Ted, who receives the last truffula seed, and unless he cares, nothing will change.
Because unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better.
The book that inspired the Lorax movie was written in 1970 by a man named Theodore Geisel, better known as Dr. Seuss, the same creator of The Grinch. This environmental children's tale was so successful that it has sold over 600 million copies to this day and has been translated into more than 20 different languages around the world. But some people who didn't agree with the perspective of the Lorax's story felt that the mustached, cute, and orange creature needed a worthy adversary. And that's how TRUAX was created. Terry Burkatuma, a woman with a background in biology and chemistry, is the author of the book. And here's a very important detail. She is an active member of the wood flooring industry in the United States. I think you can already get a sense of the book's vibe, right? It was written long after the Lorax in 1995. And I'm going to tell you the whole story behind this book now. But first, let me explain something very important to you about the origin of the TRUAX. Of course, it's obvious that the name is a deliberate satire of the Lorax, since both names have the same ending and even rhyme with each other. And since the Lorax came first, it's clear that TRUAX is a copy in this case. But what's interesting is the meaning behind the name. You may not know this, but in the United States, an organization called the Wood Flooring Manufacturers Association tried to have the book The Lorax removed from all public libraries and schools in the country.
Wait, are you serious?
However, they failed in their attempt and decided to take a drastic and, I have to admit, bold action. They themselves raised funds and created their own version of the Lorax story, but from their point of view, from the perspective of the people who rely on wood for survival. If you've watched the Lorax or read the book, you may have noticed that the Onceler cut down the truffula trees not for their wood, but for the material that was on top of the trees. It was perfect for making anything, and it led to the creation of thneeds that made him incredibly wealthy. So, in a way, we can say that the criticism of the Lorax has always been about cutting down trees in nature, but never directly addressed the exploitation of wood as something bad. But either way, since the Lorax book sold millions, the criticism of everyone who engaged in tree cutting for a living skyrocketed. All the loggers in the country started to be treated as heartless and unscrupulous individuals, just like the Onceler. And all those thousands of people who relied on that industry felt they should show their point of view on how things worked. It's like seeing the other side of the mirror, you know? It's like their truth. And that's where the name of the book came from, because the word TRUAX is like a combination of the words true plus axe. And the axe comes from the name Lorax. It's like the message is something like the true Lorax. And now I'm going to tell you the story that is in this obscure and unknown book. If you're enjoying it, comment #dark below. Actually, in the book, TRUAX is a family-owned wooden flooring company, but it is also the name of the character that appears. That implies that he is the owner of the company, and he is the only human being that appears in the story. He is fixing the wheel of his wood-carrying machine when he sees in the distance a being unlike any other he had ever seen, coming towards him, sort of flying.
Da-da! That was scary!
This creature, with the appearance of a tree wearing a leaf vest and green clothing, then starts to mess up and scatter all the wooden planks that were supposed to be transported by that man. TRUAX is always smiling, which I have to say is really strange, because if I saw a tree monster in front of me wrecking everything, I would be terrified, especially a monster with that face.
You are just so ugly, aren't you?
The being then introduces itself and says its name is Guardback, and that it was the protector of trees, demanding that he immediately stop cutting down the trees. Quite similar to the Lorax, don't you think? Truax then explains to Guardback that he plants 5 new trees for every one he cuts down. And not just him, but all his fellow lumberjacks too. Another thing that Truax tells Guardback is that thanks to him and his lumberjack friends, they have doubled the area of planted trees in 30 years. And he continues walking and explaining more and more things and points to Guardback as they calmly walk along the edge of a lake where there's a sign. Guardback says he doesn't want to wait for the new trees to grow because it would take too long, but he wants to see the old trees. But Truax says that those 95 million acres on the sign were precisely preserved for those older trees to exist. At the same time, he mentions that the new trees actually contribute more to nature than the old ones, as they release much more oxygen into the environment. Truax also tells Guardback that his friends, the trees, actually suffer more when there are wildfires, and most of these fires are caused by lightning strikes. Now tell me, don't the trees in this image resemble the trufflet trees from the Lorax? Put your thoughts in the comments if you agree with this too. And you can see the surprised expression on Guardback's face when he sees a fire caused by lightning. Truax says a few more things to the tree protector and then questions Guardback, saying, "Have you ever considered what it would be like if we could never cut down a tree again?" And he asks another question. Would we live in houses made of plastic and steel until oil and minerals run out? At that moment, Guardback leaves the same way he arrived, flying. But before leaving, he says, "I think things weren't as bad as they seemed." And it all ends with a bird feeding its chicks high up in a tree with a worm, which makes me, and perhaps you, wonder, what is the idea that the Truax book wants to convey? The fact that the book was written by an association of wood flooring manufacturers and features a company named Truax as the central figure may indicate that the material was not intended for the general public. Perhaps it was created for the thousands of employees working in the industry to show their children and present them with a different perspective. After all, what parent would want their child to grow up thinking that they are someone who only wants to destroy the world, right? At least, that's what the creators of the book believe. The funny or sad, depending on the point of view, thing is that a 1972 short film adaptation of the Lorax, released shortly after Dr. Seuss's work, and much more faithful to the book than the 2012 movie, briefly addresses this issue. In it, Wansler talks about firing hundreds of thousands of people if he were to heed the Lorax's pleas to stop cutting down trees, and the Lorax says he understands the point, but doesn't have the answer or solution. But regardless, he needed to stop chopping down those trufflet trees because they would be gone if he continued. And indeed, they disappeared. The thing is, while in the Lorax the companies are represented by a faceless, greedy person who is so foolish that they don't realize the number of trees is diminishing, and only realizes it when they chop down the last one, probably blinded by money. In Truax, the character is a smiling guy who claims to make a point of preserving some trees without cutting them down. But at the same time, he needs to cut down trees because that way he is planting more trees. And he also says that everything he does ends up helping another group of animals, those who live in the grass. It seems that Truax's mission was really to show another truth, that of the Wood Flooring Manufacturers Association and their hundreds of thousands of employees. Truax didn't have much success, as you can imagine, and that probably wasn't the goal of the book, as we mentioned. While on one hand, the Lorax advocates for the preservation of trufflet trees and all animals. On the other hand, Truax asserts that it is necessary to cut down some trees in order not to use as much oil, which would be even worse for nature. It's definitely a tense debate, but I don't think Truax will ever get a movie adaptation. I just think so. That was the story of Truax, the rival of the Lorax, and how he managed to convince the tree protector that he wasn't a bad guy, just like the Lorax made him seem. Tell us, what did you think of all this? Have you watched the Lorax? Have you heard of Truax before? Leave your thoughts down below. We want to know. Give us a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. Until next time, bye-bye.